Civic Math, New Hampshire Part 1. Last week, we stood on the shores of Rhode Island. We talked about merchants, ships, sailors, and the Atlantic Ocean. Rhode Island looked outward toward the sea. Today, we moved north to New Hampshire. At first glance, New Hampshire seemed small. It had no great city like Philadelphia. It had no vast plantations like Virginia. It only had 82,000 people in 1776. But New Hampshire accomplished something no other colony had done. Before July 4th, before even the United States officially existed, New Hampshire became the first colony to create a government independent of British authority. Think about that for a moment. Many colonies were talking about independence. New Hampshire was already figured out how to govern itself. Today, we are going to use math to understand why the decision mattered. Because freedom is one thing, running a government is another. Let's take a closer look. How small was New Hampshire? Let's put New Hampshire into perspective. In 1776, Virginia had a population of roughly 538,000 people. Massachusetts, roughly 378,000 people. Pennsylvania, roughly 250,000 people. And New Hampshire had a population of roughly 82,000 people. So let's compare these two. Okay, Virginia and New Hampshire. So 82,000 versus 538,000. That's roughly 0.152. So that means New Hampshire was 15% of Virginia. Imagine 13 business partners. One partner controls 15% of the resources of the largest partner. Would you expect that person to lead the group? Probably not. Yet New Hampshire became the first colony to demonstrate that Americans could govern themselves without a king. Sometimes leadership is not about size. Sometimes leadership is about acting first. Next, let's examine what exactly New Hampshire produced. So New Hampshire produced lumber, masts for the Royal Navy ships, fish, livestock, barrels, and timber products. New Hampshire famous white pine trees were especially valuable. Some grew to 150 feet tall. The British Navy constantly needed replacement masts for warships. Imagine a single mast weighing several tons. Now imagine dozens of ships requiring replacements over time. One large tree could become a critical piece of a British warship. New Hampshire forests were not just trees, they were military resources. Now let's do some civic math. Suppose a merchant vessel carries 40 tons of lumber. Okay. If 15 ships leaves Portsmouth during a busy season, so that's 40 times 15, that's 600 tons. That's 1.2 million pounds of lumber. a colony of roughly 82,000 people that was helping literally supply an empire. Okay. Next, let's examine distances and communication. Okay. Today, a text message reaches Philadelphia from wherever you are instantly. Okay. In 1776, information moved at the speed of a horse. The distance from Portsmouth to Philadelphia was roughly 320 miles. At 20 miles per day, that's 320 divided by 20. It's about 16 days. At 40 miles per day, it's 320 divided by 40. That's about 8 days. Imagine making a decision about war, trade, and government when every message takes over a week to drive. Of course, again, we are living the 1776, things were much, much slower. So everything, as we said, was moving at the pace of a horse. Now, nevertheless, decision making was complicated. So every message takes over a week, or at the very minimum a week, to get to destination. So during that period, a misunderstanding could last weeks. A military emergency could be over before the news arrived. This helps explain why local government had to become more independent. London was not just across the ocean, it was effectively months away. Okay. Now let's come back to this famous government that New Hampshire created in 1776, in January 1776. Okay. This happened nearly 6 months before the Declaration of Independence, officially on July 4th, 1776. Why was this so important? Because governments perform some tasks, okay? Collecting taxes, organizing court, appointing officials, maintaining orders, raise militia, make laws. The old royal government had stopped functioning. The king's authority was collapsing, so New Hampshire faced a mathematical problem. Who signs legal documents? Who signs them? Who commands militia? Who settles disputes? Who collects taxes? If nobody does these jobs, society stops working. New Hampshire's leaders decided they could not wait for London. They built a replacement government themselves. That decision transformed independence from a theory into a working system. So, what did the 6 month head start actually give? Okay, let's say from January 1776 to July 1776. That's 6 months. Okay. For half a year, New Hampshire was already appointing its government officials, self governing, and doing things that the actual government do. The declaration did not create that experiment, it announced it to the world. New Hampshire was not the largest colony, it was not the wealthiest colony, it did not have the biggest population. Yet, when the moment arrived, New Hampshire answered a question that every colony would eventually face. If Britain is no longer in charge, who governs? The answer came 6 months before the independence was declared officially and to create the United States of America. Next, we'll meet the three men who signed the Declaration for New Hampshire and calculate exactly what they risked by putting their names on one of the most dangerous documents in history. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in part 2.